100 years ago, people were able to use electricity from the air. What you see on the screen is the real article from the Science and Invention magazine. An article about the Plausen invention was published in 1922. A ball made of aluminum was filled with hydrogen or helium and, at a height of 270 meters, generated a constant electricity with a voltage of 400 volts and a strength of 1.8 amperes. Two aerostats with a capacitor battery provided a power of 81 kilowatts per day. As the author writes, its power is very great. There is no doubt that this invention will soon become widely used worldwide, especially in rural areas and where hydroelectric power is lacking. Why don't we use it nowadays? The full picture of the article I published in my Telegram channel can be found via the link in the channel's profile.
Thanks for joining us, brother. I think I want to play that video back again. I think I may have made the speed a little bit too fast
people
there.
Were able to use electricity.
I have no problem watching it again.
Yeah. So just to give people a brief summary of what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about hidden technologies, free energy devices, things that have been around since even before the time of Nikola Tesla. These are actually rediscovered technologies from him. And there's I guess we call it the Prometheus device, which is a gift from the heavens to the earth for free energy.
I do have a little bit of an objection to the term free electricity, but I'll explain why a little bit later on.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and play this video back for everyone again.
Certainly.
From the air. What you see on the screen is the real article from the Science and Invention magazine. An article about the Plausen invention was published in 1922. A ball made of aluminum was filled with hydrogen or helium and, at a height of 270 meters, generated a constant electricity with a voltage of 400 volts and a strength of 1.8 amperes. Two aerostats with a capacitor battery provided a power of 81 kilowatts per day. As the author writes, its power is very great. There is no doubt that this invention will soon become widely used worldwide, especially in rural areas and where hydroelectric power is lacking. Why don't we use it nowadays? The full picture of the article I published in my Telegram channel can be found via the link in the channel's profile.
So this technology that was displayed in that video, again, this is something that Tesla was working on, and it was going to be implemented in Western societies.
That was his hope. And from everything I've read of Nikola Tesla, nothing of what he did, well, very little, was for personal gain. He was trying to provide this to all of human society for free.
It ended up being only things that the other so-called inventors or profiteers took on that became for profit, like the alternating current.
That was part of the problem, yeah. Many things, or probably I would argue that everything that Tesla invented, excluding the Tesla coil, someone else ended up taking credit for. He contributed to the development of the light bulb, but at the time he was working for, guess who? Thomas Edison.
Oh, yeah, the guy who took all the credit.
I think it's Marconi. I can't remember his first name, but Marconi is credited with the invention of radio transmission. But even Marconi's own patent application uses something like 200 of Tesla's patents cited in his own application.
Let's talk more about this this device that what does it use? Static electricity?
The electrical charge, it's commonly referred to as static electricity, but which gives it the common misconception that it's useless. But yes, it's collecting electrical charges from the ionosphere, or as it says in that image, the electric exchange layer. But that term, or the image really, and most places you'll see similar images is portrayed in the same way, that you won't get a static charge, you won't get a charge from the atmosphere until you get up to that height. But it is a very transient thing. It can depend on humidity, the moisture level in the air for one thing, which can bring it down much lower. And it does begin at even a metre above ground level. But the higher you get, the higher the charge level is.
They're saying there's a layer in the atmosphere that has this electrical charge, and it's typically above a thundercloud.
Thunderclouds tend to form basically as the they act as a medium basically between the ground and the ionosphere, where the water molecules in that cloud will act as a conduit basically to allow the charges to jump from the highest charge layer through the cloud to the ground.
This is similar to this. What would you call this? This is a tower built by Tesla, right?
I will admit that I believe this image is most likely photoshopped,
Okay.
but it does depict at least one understanding of how the tower that Tesla was building at the time his funding for this project was pulled. This is a facility called Wardenclyffe Tower. The building you see in the foreground is still there, and the concrete foundation is still there, but that tower has now been completely demolished.
That's a piece of American history. I don't
It
know why they
is.
would destroy that.
And it was supposed to be not only a test project, but also the first of a network of towers that would allow, again, the patents have disappeared and the blueprints and everything have vanished
Yeah.
for what this was supposed to do. But if you look at it, looking at the design of it, you can see a silhouette inside the tower itself that looks a lot like a Tesla coil. And so my presumption from this is that the dome of the tower itself was intended to pull those charges from the atmosphere and relay them into the coil. And that is where the power was actually getting transmitted from, because it's been shown that if you have two Tesla coils, now the coil itself, I'm sure everyone's seen an image of one, you have a primary coil and a secondary. And if you have two of them that are wound with the exact same number of turns on the secondary coil, you put power into one, and like a tuning fork, the other one will pick up that power. I'm sure everyone's seen the scientific experiment. If you have two tuning forks near each other, you hit one, the other one will start vibrating at the same frequency.
And what is that related to magnetism or
More closely related to radio waves.
radio waves?
Or actually, electromagnetic waves to be more accurate, because
Okay.
radio waves are a form of electromagnetic radiation, but they can be transmitted a long distance.
And there were other devices that
yeah.
Tesla helped to invent, like you were saying before.
The alternating current power is one, and I can't remember who it was. That may have actually been Edison as well after Tesla stopped working for him. But alternating current power was made infamous at the time by, again, assuming it was whichever individual it was, would demonstrate the danger of this by electrocuting animals in public. Which is just a horrendous thing. But the second on the list, obviously, as we've mentioned, the Tesla coil. And although this is something that many people have reproduced all around the world, I don't think everyone has fully realised the potential that it has. The magnifying transmitter, I'm not 100% sure what that is, but I think it's got something to do with the actual transmission of the term itself indicates magnifying and transmitting the energy from one coil to another. Now, the next one, the Tesla turbine, is a personal favourite of mine, because this is a generator that can run off flowing water, it can run off compressed air, it can run off steam. And a very simple principle, only one moving part, really. And all it uses is friction or surface tension. You have a stack of discs, ideally metal for their strength, with very narrow gaps between them. And your flowing medium, steam, water, air, whatever, is channeled in. It flows between these discs and basically grabs hold of them, makes them rotate. There is a example of it. I think it's in a museum, and you can tell it's made out of cast iron. Now, at least the main housing of it. And from what I've read, allowing for the fact that cast iron was apparently very different to what we see these days, like much higher quality. I've also read claims, there it is there. There are some machined parts, but and copper tubing, but the official claim is that this cannot be reproduced today because the materials we have would be torn apart by the forces generated in the Tesla turbine.
That doesn't seem like a plausible way to deny that they couldn't make it. That the forces would be too great. But they can somehow contain nuclear reactions. But they can't contain a steam turbine.
Yeah. A nuclear reaction is a very different thing, but...
I'm just saying the complexities.
Fair point.
Yeah.
But a steam train is a better... probably a better comparison in this context, that you have something rolling down the railway and comparatively for their time, when steam trains were at their peak, enormous speeds, enormous velocities, massive levels of pressure, but somehow this can't be reproduced in 2024 in a usable way.
Yeah, it sounds like a feeble excuse to me. But we're seeing a lot of that with Tesla's technologies being suppressed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
feeble excuses.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that have been disappeared when they try to make free energy devices or more equitable energy devices.
Yeah. So there's that term that flows around which creates the perception of producing electricity out of nothing. But there has to be for one thing, there has to be a source for the charge. But in addition to that, using the term free, at least in my view, also creates this idea that nothing needs to be, no resources, no anything needs to be put in. But you still need to contribute materials to build whatever device.
And maintain it.
And maintain it, yeah. So there's extremely cheap energy and highly efficient energy.
Okay, so maybe the terminology we should use instead would be like more equitable energy sources.
As you've been saying, and I agree.
But these things, they don't create as much of a profit margin for big companies, and they can't control the resources required to make them.
Which is also a big part of the problem with going back to the wireless transmission that Tesla wanted to do. He was being funded by... It was, for those who have their eyes open, probably one of the most famous people in American history, J.P. Morgan, who...
He was one of the founders of Morgan Stanley Bank.
And J.P. Morgan Chase as well, I believe, at least as a derivative of, or a subsidiary of that, I'm not sure.
Later on I think it was, but yeah.
when Tesla was building Wardenclyffe Tower, he was being funded, that whole project was funded by JP Morgan, up until the point that he found out that the power being provided to the people could not be regulated. People could just harvest it as they wished, free. Now,
Big business.
it's not just that. Morgan, JP Morgan at the time, himself owned copper mines. He owned factories to produce wiring specifically for the transmission of electrical power. All of that would have been rendered valueless, almost.
Oh, yeah, once this technology is implemented.
Yeah.
But you still need to transit power from the source to the home, for example. So some wiring would be required.
But vastly less than what's implemented today.
Yeah, there wouldn't be power lines running from a grid to a single
wiring
source.
still needs to be used in the coils, for example. So it could still be implemented there, but the resources needed, drastically reduced.
Yeah. And he was probably sitting on a whole lot of copper, and it would have been like diamonds. They would have had to figure out a way to limit it.
Which, transitioning back to what you mentioned earlier about Tesla's wireless transmission being a rediscovery. Now, we've talked about this when we talked about Tartaria.
Yep.
Those buildings having big copper spires on the top of them and wiring that seemed to go nowhere inside the structures. It was all stripped out over a period of time. Many different examples of things. I've even seen photos of buildings where an arrangement of domes, just them and their supporting structures, were just removed. Photos taken like in the 1800s, presumably, or early 1900s, and then photos taken within the last, maybe 15, 20 years. And these parts of the structure are just gone.
Trying to erase our history. They're trying to prevent people from living what would seem like a luxurious lifestyle to third world peoples, but making first world amenities available to them for really low cost.
It's keeping the poor people poor.
There was another device recently.
This one, I stumbled across this a couple of days ago, and I know I didn't really explain it much.
Yeah, you didn't tell me much about it.
At all, prior to the beginning of the live stream. On the left, now these have almost completely fallen into disuse in cars and trucks.
What is that we're looking at?
On the left is a carburetor from a dirt bike.
Okay.
I'm not sure of the year model, but from what I've seen on bikes I've had myself, they're all fairly much the same. On the left, on the right, is a modernised design that, and this is an example of, that there's been stories floating around which at one point myself I believed were fact, but looking into it further, there's no way it can work. This idea of like carburetors that can make a car get anywhere up to say 500 miles per gallon. But on the right is a newly designed motorcycle carburetor designed to just directly replace the existing one. And while it does have dramatic improvements in simplicity, it doesn't give you 500 miles per gallon. But what it does give is a efficiency increase of anywhere up to 25 or 30%. See, a lot of combustion engines, they are inefficient in many ways. But one of those is that they don't burn their fuel completely. So some of the exhaust is vaporized fuel.
Right. I want to read one of the comments that we received. This is actually from our Vicar General. He says that pacing technological development is this. Well, maybe I'll summarize what he's saying or rephrase it. But he's basically saying that pacing the technological development is done at this pace according to is appropriate for social development. So what we have here is obvious suppression of technologies, but it is growing at a steady pace for what you might consider social development. But there's a technology that will be available in the New Kingdom that will be on pace with the social development that we expect to happen in the near future.
Also, well, in reference to the comment, we have seen examples of technology accelerating beyond the point of human development in the past and it being suppressed. The most famous example is the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. And that was divine suppression.
Yeah.
So it seems as though while on the surface it could seem nefarious that these things are being suppressed, it could be for a higher purpose that it's being suppressed.
Yeah. At the time of the destruction of the Tower of Babel, mankind they were on a development pace where they would be like a very primitive version of human society would be at a point where they would be venturing into space. Can you imagine that?
No. Cavemen in space? No. No, that would be a disaster. So yeah, of course.
And again, with
prevention measures had to be put in place.
Again, Tartaria. It's a softer version of the same kind of reset. I can only imagine how wonderful life would have been with the technology that they had, and obviously for similar reasons, things needed to be staggered a little bit.
So one of the devices that will be implemented in the New Kingdom is something called the Prometheus device. But there's concepts about it that should probably be explained first.
It's a very simple concept. It's basically magnetic repulsion.
Okay. And with a wheel turbine?
Basically much like a generator, but the theory is looking on YouTube for 5 minutes, looking for magnetic repulsion motor, you'll find so many different variations on the concept that it's bordering on absurd. And all using the concept of using magnets repelling each other to make a rotor turn to produce electricity.
And this concept of angling the magnets, is that just to keep it running so it doesn't lock up?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is similar to what's being shown here on this Prometheus device from Lord Rael.
This one, it perfects the design. Because although the image seems very simple, I was about to say similar, which it kind of is, but the problem with a lot of these designs that you see people showing on YouTube and other platforms is they seem to follow a concept of let's add as many magnets as possible. And it's really not necessary because all you're doing is adding magnetic interference, additional weight. Because if you have the magnets too close to each other, they are going to the magnetic field lines are going to interfere with each other. So what this design does, it eliminates. And admittedly, this image is very simple, but it's all it really needs to be.
Eliminates what?
Eliminates excess weight, spaces out the magnets from each other so they aren't interfering with each other, and just does what needs to be done.
I think it's interesting it mentions specifically a direct current motor. Yeah. Well, why would that be instead of alternating current? Because alternating current would seem more efficient.
exact reason for that I'm not 100% sure of, but
I just don't
I
notice
do
that.
know,
Yeah.
at least potentially speaking, DC motors are simpler, and you can always feed the power from that
Okay. So,
into a brushless DC motor at that.
so what could be the intention here is to make a device available for creating at home.
Yeah. So a brushless DC motor, for one thing, less friction they have, by my understanding. So there's less resistance to the magnets turning the rotor there. And the power that's coming out of the motor, you can always feed into if you've got a big enough power, you can feed it into a battery bank or into the words escaped me, an inverter
Okay.
that will convert it to alternating current.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. The name of the device, Prometheus,
Yeah.
right? You and I were talking about this the other day, and we were speaking about the mythology around the was it Greek god Prometheus.
The Greek god Prometheus, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about Prometheus.
There's two different stories, but they both have the same underlying concept.
Okay.
That Zeus chose to withhold fire from mankind.
Uh-huh.
And Prometheus basically stole it from Mount Olympus and gave it to mankind against Zeus's command.
Okay, so that said...
And he was punished for it, but it's
yeah,
two different ways, but
right,
that's
but
irrelevant.
Exactly. The relevant part is that he gave an energy source to mankind
As a divine gift.
From a divine source.
Yeah.
Which was not intended for mankind at that time. Very interestingly, correlation here, because Lord Rael attempted to offer this gift to mankind, and
that screenshot is all that remains of what was once a much more detailed video, and even I have never seen the full video. It does not exist anymore.
Right. Well, what I'm alluding to here is that, like in those times, now mankind still is not ready for this divine gift.
Well, yeah. And what I was gonna, you're very right, and part of the reason I have seen people try to reproduce the Prometheus device, and I could immediately see the problems. In at least one design I saw, they used metal bike wheels for the rotor.
Okay.
Attaching the magnets to that. Can you?
I would think that like plastic would be a better choice.
Maybe carbon fiber. But
yeah,
for a simple
like
way to
PVC piping, I think would be a cheap way of doing it. It's pretty strong.
Strong, yeah, but on a small scale, like a large diameter.
Yeah, just to test it out, test the concept out.
I did actually. I never had this at the time in the circumstances I was in at the time. I never had the time to complete it, but I did actually try doing it once, but I never got the time to. I had the rotor built, and just under the circumstances I was in at the time, didn't have the time to complete it.
When you're ready, you can help us to get disappeared. You know.
But for anyone that can't immediately see the problems with using metal wheels, any metal will extend a magnetic field.
Right. Well, this technology clearly, it's not available for mankind right now, and when people try to make it, it's instantly suppressed, and people are silenced or removed from this planet, one way or another, and preserved. Perhaps, at least the technology would be preserved for a later time when mankind is ready, and that time will come after this, what you might call a great reset, but not just the financial great reset, the
reset of human society.
Yeah, as a whole. So, really looking forward to that.
Well,
yeah.
This society is completely broken. The world that we live in,
that's true. And it does need to be reset. It does need to change if we're ever going to get towards that utopic Star Trek Federation of Planets sort of.
That I'm looking forward to.
Oh, it's going to be great. Do you have any preview of what we're going to talk about next week? Hasn't been decided yet?
Hasn't been decided yet.
Okay. That's okay. We don't have to tell them anything. They could just tune in next week and find out.
I'm open to comments from our audience as well.
Yeah, we'll take requests. Sure. Sounds good. All right. You guys know how to reach us.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Cardinal Matt Staader, thank you for joining us.
Been a blast. Thank you for having me.
No pun intended. All right. Well, we love you guys. Have a good day.
Truly.
Be blessed in Lord Rail's name. Love God.